Okay, so imagine this. You're sitting at your own engagement party. The room is decorated, your fiancé is right next to you, your friends are laughing and clinking glasses, and everything should feel perfect. And for a few minutes, it does. Until your mother taps her fork against her wine glass, stands up, and gives a toast that doesn't feel like a toast at all. It feels like a verdict. She looks around the room, smiles that smile you've known your whole life. The one that looks warm, but isn't. And she says, "We always hoped he'd become a doctor, but some people just don't have what it takes." And then she laughs. And a few people laugh nervously with her. And your fiancé squeezes your hand under the table so tight it almost hurts. And you sit there, in a room full of people who love you, feeling like you're 12 years old again, and you just brought home a bad report card. That was 2 years ago. And what happened before that moment and everything that happened after it is what I need to tell you today. Because this story isn't just about a bad toast at an engagement party. This is about $127,000, a decade of lies, and the moment I finally decided I was done being the quiet one in my own life. Stay with me, because this one goes deep. So let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a pretty normal-looking household. I say normal-looking because from the outside, we were fine. Nice house, 2 parents who were still married, decent neighborhood. But inside that house, there was a very specific kind of pressure that I don't think I fully understood until I was older. My parents, particularly my father, had this vision of who I was supposed to be. And that vision had a title, doctor. Not because I showed any particular love for medicine as a kid. Not because I sat around reading anatomy books or anything like that. But because in our family, being a doctor was the gold standard. It was the thing that would prove that they had done it right, that they had raised someone worthy of respect. So, from a pretty young age, everything in my life was pointed at that target. My grades, my extracurriculars, the way I spent my summers, the conversations at dinner. All of it was building toward this one future that had been chosen for me before I was old enough to choose anything myself. And I'll be honest with you, for a long time, I went along with it. Not because I loved the idea of being a doctor, but because I loved my parents. Or at least, I loved the idea of making them happy. And when you're a kid, those two things feel like the same thing. I did well in school. I worked myself to the bone to do well in school. And I got into a good university on a pre-med track. And my parents, they were so proud. And I remember thinking, okay, this is it. This is the thing that makes them look at me like that. So I held on to it. Now here's where it starts to get complicated. And I want you to pay close attention to this part, because this is where the financial piece of this whole thing begins. Before I started university, my parents sat me down and told me they had been saving for my education. My dad made it sound like this great sacrifice, this thing they had done out of pure love, building up a fund for me over the years so I wouldn't have to worry about money while I was studying. He said the number out loud, $127,000. I remember it clearly because he said it with this weight, like he was handing me something sacred. And I was grateful. I was so genuinely grateful. I hugged them both. My mom cried a little. It felt like one of those real family moments, you know? I started university. Tuition was being covered, or so I was told. My dad handled all the financial stuff. I didn't have access to the account, didn't see the statements, didn't think to ask. I was a teenager who trusted his parents completely. Why would I question it? I threw myself into my studies. Pre-med is brutal. I don't care what anyone says. The coursework is relentless, the competition is intense, and the psychological toll of knowing that one bad semester can derail everything. It's a lot. I was stressed constantly, but I kept pushing because that was the plan. That was the dream. Well, their dream. But I'd made it mine, or at least I'd convinced myself I had. Then, somewhere in my second year, something started shifting inside me. I started noticing that the things that lit me up, the things I actually got excited about, weren't in the pre-med curriculum. I was taking an elective in architecture, and I was staying up until 2 a.m, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I was sketching things, thinking about space and structure, and how buildings make people feel. And then I'd go to my organic chemistry class the next morning and feel nothing but dread. I didn't say anything to my parents for a long time, because I already knew how that conversation would go. But eventually, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was starting to think seriously about switching my major. I wanted to pursue architecture, And I want to be clear, this wasn't some impulsive decision. I had thought about it for months. I had looked into programs, talked to professors, done the research. I felt genuinely called to it in a way I had never felt called to medicine. So I told my parents. My dad went quiet in a way that was somehow louder than yelling. My mom asked me if I had lost my mind, and then they did what they always did when they were unhappy with me. They made me feel like my entire worth as a person was on the line. My dad said something I still think about sometimes. He said, "We didn't sacrifice everything so you could draw buildings." And I remember the word sacrifice hitting me strange, like something I should have examined more closely in that moment. But I didn't. I backed down. I told them I'd think about it. I stayed in the pre-med track. Looking back, that was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. Not the staying, but the backing down without asking the questions I should have asked. Because here is what I did not know at that time. That fund they had told me about, that $127,000, it was already gone. I didn't find out until years later. And the way I found out is almost as painful as the thing itself. Fast forward. I graduated. I applied to medical schools. I got some interviews, didn't get in the first cycle. Applied again. Didn't get in. And with each rejection, the atmosphere in my parents' house got heavier. I wasn't living at home at this point, thank God. But every phone call, every visit, I could feel it. This low-grade disappointment humming underneath everything they said to me. Like I was failing at the assignment they had given me. During this time, I met her, my fiancé. And she is, the kind of person who makes you feel like yourself again when you've been pretending for so long that you've almost forgotten who you actually are. She asked me once, early in our relationship, what I would do if I could do anything, and I told her about architecture. And she didn't look at me like I was being naive. She just nodded and said, "So why aren't you doing that?" And it was the simplest question, but I genuinely did not have a good answer. She encouraged me to look into it seriously, and I did. And I found a graduate program in architecture that I could actually get into. And I made the decision. I was going to switch paths. I was going to do what I should have done years earlier. I had to figure out financing, and this is the moment I discovered the truth. I called my dad to talk about the fund. I assumed there would still be something in it, maybe not the full amount, but something that could help me with this new program. And his answer was strange. He was vague. He said things like, "We had to make some adjustments over the years, and money doesn't just sit still, you know." And I pushed. I asked direct questions, and eventually, over the course of several painful conversations, the picture came together. The money was gone. All of it. Had been gone for years. And it hadn't gone toward my education. It had gone toward their lifestyle. A renovation on the house, a car, some investments that didn't pan out, a vacation they took the summer before my second year of university. Little by little, year by year, the fund that was supposed to be for my future had been quietly drained to maintain a present that looked a certain way from the outside. I don't have the words to fully describe what that felt like. It wasn't just the money. Though the money was real, and the loss of it was real. It was the betrayal of the story I had been told. I had made decisions, huge, life-shaping decisions, based on a foundation that didn't exist. I had stayed in a path that was making me miserable, partly because I believed there was financial infrastructure supporting it. And that entire time, they had known. They had known and said nothing. I confronted them. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. My dad got defensive immediately. He started talking about everything they had done for me. How they had put a roof over my head, how I should be grateful. My mom cried, which she always does when accountability gets too close. And instead of an apology, instead of any real acknowledgement of what they had done, what I got was a pivot. Suddenly, it was about my failures. Suddenly, it was about the fact that I hadn't gotten into medical school, as if the reason to be upset here was my record and not their theft, because that's what it was. Let's call it what it is. They took money that was designated for my education and used it for themselves without telling me. That is theft. I don't care that they're my parents. I want to pause here and just say something to anyone watching who might be in a similar situation. When someone takes something from you and then responds to being caught by making you feel like the problem is your reaction and not their action, that is a manipulation tactic. It is a way of protecting themselves by making you question your own right to be upset. And it works, especially on people who have been conditioned their whole lives to prioritize keeping the peace over telling the truth. I know, because it almost worked on me. I didn't collapse this time. I held my ground. I told them clearly that what they had done was wrong, that I needed time away from them, and that I was going to move forward with my life on my own terms. And I did. I enrolled in the architecture program. I took out loans. I worked part-time. My fiancé and I budgeted everything to the last dollar. It was hard in a way that I won't pretend wasn't hard. But it was also the first time in my adult life that I felt like I was actually living my own story. And things were actually good. I was excelling in the program in a way I had never excelled in pre-med, because this time I actually wanted to be there. I was designing things I was proud of. My professors were encouraging. My fiancé and I were building something real together, and after about a year of very limited contact, my parents and I started talking again. Slowly. Carefully. I wanted to believe that the confrontation had shifted something. I wanted to believe that they understood the gravity of what they had done. I was wrong. Because then came the engagement party. When we got engaged, my fiancé and I decided to have a small celebration. Just close friends and family. And I know you're already thinking, why did you invite them? And the honest answer is because despite everything, they were my parents, and I still carried some version of the hope that one day they would just show up and be the people I needed them to be. And for the first hour of that party, they seemed fine. My dad shook my hand. My mom hugged my fiancé, told her she was beautiful. I started to relax. I told myself maybe things really were shifting, and then my mother stood up to give that toast, and she said what she said. About how they had always hoped I'd become a doctor. About how some people just don't have what it takes. In front of my fiancé, in front of my friends, in front of people who had watched me struggle and grow and build something real. She stood up at my engagement party and reduced my entire journey to a punchline. The room got weird and quiet, and then someone changed the subject, and the party moved on the way parties do when something uncomfortable happens and everyone decides collectively to act like it didn't. But I felt it. My fiancé felt it. And I made a decision in that moment, very quietly, sitting there with her hand in mine, that I was done. Not done in an explosive, dramatic way. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or cry or confront anyone in that room. I just made a decision inside myself that this was the last time. The last time I would sit through something like that. The last time I would extend an invitation hoping for something different and getting the same thing. The last time I would let the story they wanted to tell about me get told in rooms where people could hear it. After the party, my fiancé and I talked for a long time. She was steady and clear, and she asked me what I wanted to do. Not what I should do, not what was expected of me. What I wanted. And what I wanted was distance. Real distance. Not the temporary kind I had done before. I wanted to build my life in a way where their narrative about me didn't have a seat at the table anymore. So here's what I did. I sat down and I wrote them a letter. Not an angry letter, not a list of grievances, though God knows I had enough material. It was a clear, measured, honest letter. I told them that I loved them. I told them that I had spent most of my life trying to be who they needed me to be, and that it had cost me years of my own happiness. I told them about the money. I put it in writing clearly what they had done and how it had affected my life. And I told them that I was choosing to step back from a relationship that had consistently made me feel less than, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I needed to protect the life I was building. I didn't ask for an apology. I had learned by then that asking for an apology from someone who doesn't believe they've done anything wrong is just a way of setting yourself up to be disappointed again. Their response was, and I wish I were exaggerating, a voice message from my dad in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that I had always been dramatic and that when I was ready to be reasonable, they'd be here. My mom texted me a Bible verse. That was it. And you know what? That response told me everything I needed to know. It confirmed that the distance I had chosen was right. In the time since then, my life has genuinely changed. I graduated from my architecture program. I got a job at a firm I'm proud to be at. My fiancé and I got married. A beautiful small ceremony with people who actually celebrated us. I stand in my work every day, and I feel something I could never manufacture when I was chasing someone else's dream. I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Now, I want to address something that I know some of you might be thinking because I've heard it before. Some of you might be wondering if I was too harsh. If cutting off your parents over money and a bad toast is an overreaction. And I want to gently push back on that framing. Because what I described isn't a bad toast and a financial mistake. What I described is a pattern. A decade-long pattern of my identity being shaped by their needs, my choices being constrained by their expectations, my future being literally funded by a lie, and my accomplishments being dismissed the moment they didn't fit their script. The toast was just the moment I stopped pretending the pattern wasn't there. I've thought a lot about forgiveness, and I want to be clear about what I believe. Forgiveness doesn't mean readmission. I can forgive my parents. I can release the anger. I can wish them well in my heart, without opening my door back up to the same behavior. Forgiveness is for me. It's how I carry this without it eating me alive. But trust is something different. Trust has to be earned back, and you cannot earn it back if you haven't even admitted you lost it. There are moments, I won't lie to you, where it still hurts. When something big happens in my life, and I have this split second where I think, I wish I could call them and have it be simple. I wish I had parents I could share good news with without bracing for the catch. That grief is real, and I don't think it fully goes away. But it gets quieter, and it gets easier to hold when your life is full of people who actually see you. If you're watching this, and you're in a situation where the people who were supposed to be your foundation have instead been the thing you've had to climb out from under, I see you. I know how complicated it is. I know how much love is tangled up in the hurt. I know how much you wish it were different. But I also want you to know that there is a version of your life on the other side of that story that is genuinely yours, and it is worth protecting. You are not the failure in someone else's narrative. You are the author of your own, and if the people in your life can't see that, it doesn't make it less true. Thank you for watching. If this hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. I read them, I really do, and I'd love to know your thoughts. If you're new here, subscribe because there's a lot more where this came from. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.